What would you do if everything you'd worked for, and everyone you'd loved, seemed to turn against you? For Becky Thompson, life has always been about family. After the death of her husband, she devoted herself entirely to her only son, Ethan, supporting him as he built Thompson & Co. into a successful family business. But on her 72nd birthday, Becky faces a devastating betrayal that pushes her to question everything. Uncovering hidden secrets about Ethan's closest allies, Becky is forced to make a choice that will change her life forever, and theirs. Will she have the strength to confront the people she once trusted most? And can Ethan find redemption before it's too late? Join us on this powerful journey of resilience, family loyalty, and second chances. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this one. And let us know in the comments, what would you do if someone close to you broke your trust? Now let's begin the story. The town of Oak Valley rested in a misty stillness that broke only when dawn's first rays began to sweep over the rooftops, casting the quiet streets in a soft golden glow. It was the kind of town that felt like a step back in time. The storefronts were modest, the parks well kept, and people waved to each other on morning strolls. Rising above the town on a gentle hill was the Thompson Mansion, a grand, ivy-covered estate that had stood for generations. Its white columns gleamed in the dawn light, standing sentinel over the town below. In a second-story room of the mansion, Becky Thompson stirred from sleep. Today wasn't just any day. Today marked her 72nd birthday. As the sun began streaming through her bedroom window, she sat up, the realization bringing a quiet smile to her lips. She'd spent many years in this very house, filling it with love, memories, and laughter. But now, things were different. The house was still grand, the chandeliers still sparkled, and the halls still stretched into rooms filled with valuable antiques. Yet it felt as if a shadow had crept into every corner, dulling the mansion's former warmth. Dressing carefully, Becky selected a soft blue dress that brought out the brightness in her eyes, which hadn't dimmed despite her age. Her silver hair was styled in a neat bun, and she placed a simple string of pearls around her neck, the same necklace her late husband had given her on their 10th wedding anniversary. Though her hands trembled slightly with age, her eyes sparkled as she took one last look in the mirror. "Today will be a wonderful day," she told herself, the optimism tinged with hope and longing. Walking through the grand halls, Becky took in the sights and sounds, or rather, the silence. The house, which had once resonated with the laughter of her son and his friends, now felt like an empty shell. Ethan, her only child, was the reason she had returned to this house. After her husband passed, he had insisted she come live with him, saying he couldn't bear the thought of her being alone. She'd been touched, and in those early days, the mansion had felt like home again. But as Ethan's business grew, so did the distance between them. Now, at 46, he was a well-respected name in construction, with a company that bore their family's name, Thompson & Co., employing hundreds of workers across the country. Becky couldn't help but feel proud of him. But she couldn't shake the ache of nostalgia for a time when he would rush through these very halls, his eyes bright with dreams and ambitions he eagerly shared with her. The quiet of the morning enveloped her as she made her way down to the dining room. A grand oak table stretched the length of the room, but as she entered, she noticed it was bare. She had expected at least a card, a small bouquet of flowers, some sign that her birthday hadn't gone unnoticed. Her heart dipped, but she quickly brushed it off. Surely, she thought, they must be planning a surprise. Becky wandered to the kitchen, hoping to find the familiar faces of the staff, perhaps working on something special. Yet the room was empty. Only the quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the air, leaving Becky alone with her thoughts. Determined not to let the day be ruined, Becky decided to find Ethan herself. Perhaps he was busy in his study, preparing a surprise, or maybe he'd planned an outing for them. She would give him the benefit of the doubt. After all, he had always been thoughtful, and her birthday had always been a special day in their family. As she neared the study, however, she heard voices drifting through the slightly ajar door. She paused, recognizing the familiar tones of her son and his wife, Lauren. Becky knew she shouldn't eavesdrop, but something about the tone of their conversation made her hesitate. I can't believe your mother expects us to drop everything just for her birthday. Lauren's voice was clipped, filled with impatience. We have the investor luncheon today, and that is far more important right now. Ethan's voice, usually confident, sounded hesitant. I know, but it's her 72nd birthday, Lauren. We could have postponed the luncheon, at least spent a little time with her this morning. Lauren's response was cold, her words cutting. Are you serious? You're willing to risk everything for a cake and some candles? She should understand that the world doesn't revolve around her anymore. Each word struck Becky like a blow. She had always suspected Lauren was less than fond of her, but hearing it confirmed left her feeling exposed and vulnerable. What hurt most, though, was Ethan's silence, the absence of any defense, any hint of the affection she thought still remained between them. Taking a steadying breath, Becky gently knocked on the door and entered. Ethan and Lauren looked up, startled, their faces a blend of guilt and irritation. Becky kept her expression soft, masking the hurt she felt beneath a warm smile. Good morning, she greeted, keeping her voice light. I was just wondering if there were any plans today, maybe something special? Ethan glanced away, shuffling the papers on his desk, while Lauren approached her with a superficial smile. Oh, Becky, good morning, Lauren said, her voice as sweet as it was insincere. I'm afraid we're terribly busy today. There's a very important luncheon we can't miss. Becky felt a pang in her chest, but she forced herself to keep smiling. I understand, she replied softly. I just thought, since it's my birthday. For a fleeting second she thought she saw regret flicker across Ethan's face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, but his tone was distant. Mom, we just can't. I'm sure you understand. The words stung more than Becky expected. She had always believed that her son would prioritize family above all, that he would value the bond they shared. But now, faced with his indifference, she felt something within her begin to break. The love she had given so freely over the years seemed to have dwindled in his heart, replaced by a coldness she could barely recognize. Of course, she whispered, barely able to hold back tears. I don't want to interfere with your plans. Becky retreated to her room, her heart heavy with a grief she hadn't felt in years. Sitting on the edge of her bed, she allowed the tears to fall, mourning the son she thought she knew, the boy who had once run to her for comfort and guidance. It was as though he had grown into a man who no longer needed her, who had forgotten the years she had devoted to his happiness. She thought of all the sacrifices she had made for him, of the love she had poured into his life, and for a moment she felt a flicker of anger. She had given him everything, her time, her care, her heart, and now, on her birthday, she was left alone, dismissed as though her presence were an inconvenience. Becky knew she had a choice to make. She could continue living in this house, accepting the crumbs of affection Ethan offered, or she could reclaim her life, her dignity, and find her own path forward. It was a terrifying thought, but one that brought with it a strange sense of freedom. The decision crystallized as she stood by the window, looking out over the manicured lawns that stretched to the edge of the property. This house, with all its grandeur and luxury, no longer felt like a home. It had become a gilded cage, and she knew that if she stayed, her heart would wither within its walls. Becky pulled out an old suitcase from her closet and began to pack, her movements deliberate and calm. She chose only the essentials, a few clothes, some family photos, and the pearl necklace her husband had given her. Each item she placed in the suitcase felt like a piece of her past, a reminder of the life she had loved and the woman she was determined to become once more. As she zipped up the suitcase, she took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. This was her first act of independence in a long time, a chance to reclaim her life and discover who she was beyond the roles of mother and widow. With a sense of resolve, she left a note on her son's desk. I'll be staying with Grace. You'll know where to find me if you need me. Love always, Mom. With her suitcase in hand, Becky walked down the long driveway, each step feeling like a weight lifted from her shoulders. The streets of Oak Valley were quiet, but as she made her way through the town, she noticed the curious glances of passers-by. People murmured as they watched her. A woman of her age, dressed in her Sunday best, pulling a suitcase down Main Street. She met their gazes without shame, her head held high, a quiet determination guiding her steps. The walk to Grace Parker's house felt both foreign and familiar. Grace had been her best friend since childhood, the one person who had always understood her, who had been there through every joy and sorrow. She knew that Grace's modest home, though small, would be filled with warmth and love, the very things that had faded from her life at the mansion. When she reached the doorstep, she took a deep breath and knocked. Moments later, the door swung open, and Grace's face lit up with surprise and concern as she took in the sight of her friend, suitcase in hand and eyes brimming with tears. "Becky," Grace whispered, pulling her into a tight embrace. "What's happened?" In that embrace, Becky felt the weight of her grief begin to lift. Here, in her friend's warm home, she was finally safe. Safe to heal, to rediscover herself, and perhaps to find a new beginning. The gentle hum of Grace's old tea kettle filled the quiet kitchen as Becky settled into the cozy chair across from her friend. Grace's home was modest, with simple floral curtains, worn but comfortable furniture, and shelves stacked with novels, each one read and reread over the years. For Becky, it felt like stepping back into a simpler, warmer world, one that held comfort rather than pressure. Grace poured the tea, her gaze never leaving Becky's face. She had known Becky her entire life, and one look told her everything she needed to know. "You don't have to explain anything just yet, Becky," Grace said softly, her voice gentle. "Just know you're welcome here as long as you need." Becky offered her a grateful smile, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Thank you, Grace. I wasn't sure where else to go." Grace squeezed her hand. "There's nowhere I'd rather you be. You're family to me." The words warmed Becky's heart, and she realized that even though her own family had felt distant, the bonds she'd formed over the years with friends like Grace were just as strong. As they sipped their tea, Becky shared the story of her birthday. The empty dining room, the overheard conversation, the indifference in Ethan's eyes. Grace listened without interruption, her expression softening with each word. "Oh, Becky," Grace murmured when Becky finished, reaching across the table to clasp her hands. "You deserve so much more than they've given you. I don't know how Ethan could lose sight of what he has in you." Becky shook her head, a mixture of pain and resolve hardening her expression. "I don't understand it either, but for the first time I feel free. I'm finally able to make choices for myself." The following morning, Becky woke up to the sound of laughter drifting in from the kitchen. She smiled, recognizing the voice of Grace's brother, Charlie Parker. Charlie was a retired detective who had spent most of his life in Oak Valley, a man known for his quiet strength and unshakable sense of justice. Becky had known him for years, though their lives rarely overlapped outside of occasional town events. As she entered the kitchen, Charlie's laughter subsided, his gaze softening as he saw her. "Becky," he greeted warmly, "Grace told me you'd be here. I hope you don't mind the intrusion." Becky smiled, a sense of ease filling her. "Not at all, Charlie. It's good to see a familiar face." Charlie poured her a cup of coffee and settled into a chair beside her. "Grace told me a bit about what happened," he began gently. "I'm sorry things turned out this way, Becky, but if there's anything I can do to help, you know I'm here." The offer touched Becky deeply. "Thank you, Charlie. I never thought I'd be in a position like this, feeling so lost." She hesitated, glancing down at her cup. "I just don't understand how Ethan has changed so much. I feel like I don't know him anymore." Charlie's brow furrowed thoughtfully. "Sometimes, people get so wrapped up in their lives that they forget what's important. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that when someone changes this drastically, there's usually a reason." Becky looked up, meeting his steady gaze. "What do you mean?" Charlie hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I've heard some things about Thompson and Co., he said finally. "Rumors about financial troubles and questionable practices. I'm not saying it's true, but I thought you should know." Becky's stomach twisted. Ethan had never mentioned any problems with the business, but the thought that he might be hiding something nagged at her. She had seen his stress over the past year, noticed the way he'd spent more time at the office, and heard the constant murmuring of phone calls behind closed doors. But he'd never shared any concerns with her. "Could you find out more, Charlie?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's a lot to ask, but I need to know if there's more going on than I realized." Charlie nodded without hesitation. "Of course, Becky. I'll do some discreet digging. I'll let you know if I find anything." Charlie's investigation began quietly, using his connections in the community to gather information. With each piece he uncovered, the puzzle grew darker. Financial records showed discrepancies, and subtle clues pointed to funds being moved. Funds that seemed to disappear into unknown accounts. Charlie soon found himself tracing a web of complex transactions, each leading deeper into the mysteries surrounding Thompson and Co. Over the next few days, Becky and Grace fell into a routine. They spent quiet mornings tending to Grace's small garden, afternoons sipping tea on the porch, and evenings discussing what Charlie had found. Grace encouraged Becky to explore her feelings about Ethan, and gradually, Becky found herself voicing the anger and betrayal she'd buried for so long. "It's like he's a stranger now," Becky confessed one evening. "All I ever wanted was to see him happy, but now I feel like I don't know him at all." Grace placed a comforting hand on Becky's shoulder. "You've given him everything, Becky. But maybe it's time for you to take back some of that energy and focus it on yourself. This could be a new beginning." A sense of calm settled over Becky as she listened to her friend's words. For the first time, she felt that maybe she could find happiness beyond the life she'd built around her son. As days turned into a week, Charlie's findings became harder to ignore. One evening, he returned with a stack of documents, his expression troubled. "I've found something, Becky," he said, laying the papers on the table. "It's not good." Becky scanned the documents, her heart sinking with each word. The evidence pointed to a pattern of financial manipulation. Funds being funneled to offshore accounts that were difficult to trace but pointed to significant mismanagement. At the center of it all were two familiar names: Lauren and Jake Russell, Ethan's closest friend and business partner. The discovery left Becky reeling. "Jake has been like a brother to Ethan," she murmured, struggling to process the betrayal. "How could he do this?" Charlie's expression was grim. "It seems that Jake and Lauren have been orchestrating this together, hiding the transfers from Ethan. They've created a structure that keeps him out of the loop, using his trust to cover their tracks." Becky's heart ached as the reality sank in. Her son had been betrayed, and he didn't even know it. She felt a mixture of anger and sorrow, a protective urge rising within her. Ethan might have pushed her away, but he was still her son, and she couldn't stand by while he was exploited. With Grace's encouragement, Becky decided she couldn't stay silent. The thought of confronting Ethan filled her with dread, but she knew that if she didn't act, he would lose everything. She spent hours gathering her courage, thinking through every possible outcome, and preparing herself for what would undoubtedly be a painful conversation. That night, she sat down with Grace and Charlie, sharing her plan. "I'm going to speak with him," she said firmly. "He may not listen, but I owe it to him to try." Charlie nodded approvingly. "You're doing the right thing, Becky. Just be prepared. He might not want to hear it." Grace took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "No matter what happens, you're not alone, Becky. We'll be here every step of the way." Becky took a deep breath, comforted by their support. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she was determined to protect her son, even if it meant risking their relationship. The following morning, Becky arranged to meet Ethan at a small cafe in town. The setting was quiet, far from the pressures of his office and the distractions of home. Ethan arrived looking tense, his eyes weary as he took a seat across from her. "Mom," he began, sounding tired. "I don't have a lot of time. What's this about?" Becky took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Ethan, I need to talk to you about the company. There are things happening that you may not be aware of, things that could ruin everything if they're not addressed." Ethan's face darkened, his brows furrowing in frustration. "Mom, I don't need you meddling in my business affairs. I've got everything under control." "No, Ethan," she replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "You don't—" "I have evidence that funds are being taken from the company. I know it's not you, but I'm afraid that someone close to you, someone you trust, may be behind it." Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a moment Becky saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. But he quickly shook his head, dismissing her words. "This is absurd. I know my team. I know Lauren and Jake. They would never betray me." Becky reached across the table, her eyes pleading. please, Ethan. Just look at the evidence. You don't have to believe me, but don't dismiss this without seeing the truth for yourself." Ethan glanced at the papers she held out to him but didn't take them. Instead, he rose from his chair, anger flashing in his eyes. "I can't believe you'd go this far, Mom. You don't trust me, and you're trying to sabotage the people I rely on. Maybe this is why we don't get along anymore." Becky's heart broke as he turned and walked away, leaving her alone with the papers still in her hand. She watched him go, feeling the sting of rejection, but she held firm in her resolve. She had planted a seed of doubt, and she could only hope it would be enough to make him question the people around him. Becky returned to Grace's house feeling drained. Ethan's reaction at the cafe replayed in her mind, each memory cutting deeper. She had gone in with the hope that he would see reason, but instead, he had cast her aside, refusing to look at the evidence she'd risked so much to bring him. Grace found her on the porch, looking out over the garden, her eyes weary. She joined her friend, settling into the seat beside her. "I take it things didn't go well." Becky nodded, a sigh escaping her. "He wouldn't listen, Grace. It was like talking to a wall." Grace placed a comforting hand on Becky's. "You did the right thing, Becky. Sometimes people need time to process the truth. He might be resistant now, but that doesn't mean your words didn't reach him." Charlie joined them a moment later, a look of concern on his face. "I've been tracking down more information, and I think you need to see this." He handed Becky a manila folder filled with more documents, his expression serious. "What is it?" Becky asked, flipping through the pages. "Jake's been moving larger sums out of Thompson & Co. than we initially thought," Charlie explained. "And it's not just Jake. Lauren's name is attached to some of these transactions. I think she's been involved in this scheme from the beginning." Becky's heart sank. She had feared Lauren might be involved, but seeing her name connected to the transactions left her feeling deeply betrayed. Lauren had been part of their family, and Ethan had loved her deeply. The thought of her betraying him, of using his trust to enrich herself, filled Becky with anger. Becky, Grace, and Charlie sat together, piecing together a plan. They knew they needed undeniable proof before bringing this to Ethan again. Otherwise, he might dismiss Becky's warnings, believing them to be meddlesome or misguided. "Charlie," Becky said, her voice firm, "can you help me find that proof? We need to expose everything if we're going to save Ethan from this mess." Charlie nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes, Becky. This goes beyond a simple betrayal. It's fraud, and if it continues, it could ruin Thompson & Co. altogether." Over the next few days, Charlie reached out to his old network, calling in favors and gathering as much information as he could. Grace, too, used her connections in town, discreetly speaking with those who worked at Thompson & Co. Together, they began to see the larger picture. Jake and Lauren had been funneling money out of the company for years, hiding their actions through complex transactions. As the days passed, Becky's determination grew. Though her heart still ached from Ethan's rejection, she knew she couldn't give up. Her role as his mother gave her both the strength and the responsibility to protect him, even if he didn't realize it. One afternoon, while Becky and Grace were sorting through the evidence, they received a visitor. It was Diane Maxwell, Thompson & Co., his head accountant, and an acquaintance of Becky's from various town events. Diane looked uneasy, glancing around before entering. "I'm not sure I should be here," Diane whispered as she sat across from Becky. "But I know you've been asking questions, and there's something you need to know." Becky's eyes widened in surprise, but she listened intently as Diane began explaining her suspicions. She had noticed the discrepancies in the accounts, but had been too afraid to confront Jake or Lauren about it. Her loyalty to the Thompson family, however, had finally overridden her fear. "It's clear that they're trying to take control of the company," Diane said, her voice laced with anger. "Jake and Lauren both have their names tied to these accounts, and the transactions don't add up. They're skimming money from every major project, then covering their tracks with fake expenses." Becky's resolve hardened as she absorbed Diane's revelations. "Thank you, Diane. I know this isn't easy, but you're doing the right thing. Ethan doesn't see what's happening, and he needs to understand the truth." With Diane's help, they gathered the final pieces of evidence. Becky now had the proof she needed to bring everything to light. Meanwhile, Ethan's life began to unravel. The confrontation with his mother left him uneasy, and he couldn't shake the memory of her pleading eyes, the desperation in her voice. He tried to focus on his work, but he found himself increasingly distracted, thoughts of Jake and Lauren's trustworthiness gnawing at the edges of his mind. One evening, as he reviewed project files, he noticed discrepancies in the accounts. A large project they'd completed last year was missing funds, significant amounts that had vanished without explanation. Ethan's unease grew, and he decided to bring it up with Jake the next day. The following morning, he asked Jake about the missing funds, hoping for a simple explanation. But Jake's response was evasive, his answers laced with defensiveness. "Don't worry about it, Ethan," he said, dismissing the concern. "These are just minor accounting issues. I've already taken care of them." Ethan left the conversation feeling more uncertain than ever. He had always trusted Jake implicitly, but now, for the first time, he began to wonder if his mother's suspicions had merit. That night, as Ethan returned home, he approached Lauren, hoping for some clarity. "Lauren," he began, his tone gentle but probing, "have you noticed anything unusual with the company accounts?" Lauren looked at him, her expression calm but guarded. "Unusual? No, not that I've noticed. Why do you ask?" Ethan hesitated, struggling to voice his concerns without sounding accusatory. "There have been discrepancies, missing funds, large sums that have been moved. I don't want to accuse anyone, but I have to be sure everything is in order." Lauren's face shifted, her gaze hardening ever so slightly. "Ethan, you're overthinking this. Business finances are complicated, and sometimes things don't add up right away. Trust Jake, he knows what he's doing." The evasiveness in her response left him cold. He felt as if he were speaking to a stranger, someone who was too composed, too controlled. In that moment, Ethan realized he couldn't ignore his doubts any longer. After gathering all the evidence, Becky decided it was time to confront Ethan one last time. This time, she wouldn't ask him to trust her. She would show him the proof and let him see for himself the betrayal he had been blinded to. She arranged to meet him at Grace's house, where they could speak privately without the influence of Jake or Lauren. When Ethan arrived, Becky sat him down, a thick stack of documents spread across the table. "Mom, if this is about the company again," he began, his voice weary. Becky met his gaze, her expression resolute. "This isn't just suspicion, Ethan. This is proof. I've spent weeks putting this together, with help from people you trust, people who know the truth about what's happening at Thompson & Co." She handed him the documents, her heart pounding as she watched him read through each page. She could see the disbelief in his eyes as he scanned the evidence, his face growing paler with each passing second. "Jake, Lauren," he murmured, his voice breaking. How could they do this?" Becky reached across the table, placing a comforting hand over his. "I know it's hard to believe, but they've betrayed you, Ethan. They've been taking from the company for years, and they've been using your trust against you." Ethan sat back, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. He looked at his mother, his expression one of sorrow and regret. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I pushed you away when you were just trying to protect me." Becky's heart swelled with relief and compassion as she watched him struggle with the realization. "Ethan, I love you. I would do anything to protect you, even if it means losing you in the process. But now that you know the truth, we can finally stop this." Ethan nodded, a look of determination settling over him. "You're right. I can't let them get away with this. I'll confront them, and we'll put an end to their scheme." Ethan returned to the mansion that night, his mind racing with the information Becky had given him. He confronted Lauren first, demanding an explanation for her involvement in the scheme. She tried to deny it at first, but when faced with the undeniable proof, her calm facade crumbled. "Fine," she admitted, her voice laced with bitterness. "Yes, I was involved. But do you really think I was the only one? You've been so wrapped up in your own world, Ethan, that you didn't see what was happening right in front of you." Ethan's heart broke as he listened, the anger and betrayal overwhelming him. He had trusted her, built a life with her, and now all of it was unraveling before his eyes. Next, he confronted Jake at the office, laying out the evidence and demanding answers. Jake, cornered and unable to deny the accusations, lashed out, accusing Ethan of taking everything for granted. "You never had to struggle, Ethan," he spat. "You had it all handed to you, and you never once appreciated it." The confrontation left Ethan shattered. His world turned upside down as he faced the truth about the people he had once called family. Back at Grace's house, Becky waited, knowing Ethan would need her more than ever. When he finally returned, exhausted and broken, she held him, offering the comfort and strength he needed to begin the healing process. "Mom," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I don't know how I let it come to this. I've lost everything I thought I had." Becky held him close, her voice soothing. "You haven't lost everything, Ethan. You have the truth now, and you have the chance to rebuild. And I'll be here with you, every step of the way." As they sat together, mother and son, a new bond formed between them, one built on forgiveness, resilience, and the promise of a new beginning. In the days following the revelations, Ethan moved through his life in a fog. The weight of betrayal and his own blindness felt unbearable. Yet he found strength in his mother's unwavering support. Thompson & Co. had been his life's work, his father's legacy, and he couldn't let Lauren and Jake's actions destroy it. Sitting across from Becky in Grace's cozy kitchen, Ethan went over his plan. "Mom, I've spoken to a lawyer. We're gathering all the documents you and Charlie provided as evidence. I want to pursue charges against them. Both of them." His voice was firm, steady, though his eyes revealed the pain underneath. Becky placed a hand over his. "I'm with you, Ethan. You're doing the right thing. But it won't be easy." Ethan nodded, the determination in his face hardening. "I know, but they need to face the consequences. For the company, for the people they've hurt, and for me." With Becky's support, Ethan took the first steps to formally expose Jake and Lauren's financial manipulations. The legal team found clear evidence of embezzlement, offshore accounts, and doctored financial reports. Together, they assembled a case that painted an undeniable picture of fraud. Diane Maxwell, the company's accountant who had bravely come forward, was instrumental in uncovering additional details. She testified that Jake had pressured her to cover up the discrepancies, going as far as to threaten her job if she didn't comply. "Thank you for coming forward, Diane," Ethan told her in a private meeting. "You're doing the right thing. I'm just sorry I didn't see this sooner." Diane's voice was soft but resolute. "We all trusted them, Ethan. They knew that, and they took advantage of it. Now we have a chance to make things right." Ethan's legal team informed him that he needed to speak with Lauren one final time before proceedings could move forward. As he approached the mansion that evening, the place felt different. No longer his sanctuary, but the site of betrayal and broken promises. Lauren met him in the grand living room, her demeanor defiant but wary. She tried to maintain her composed facade, but Ethan could see the tension in her eyes. "Ethan," she began, her voice calm, "I'm sure we can work this out. There's no need to ruin both of our lives over a misunderstanding." Ethan felt a surge of anger rise, but he forced himself to remain calm. "A misunderstanding? You lied to me, Lauren. You and Jake stole from the company and betrayed the people who trusted you. There's no working this out." For a moment Lauren's mask slipped, and her voice took on a hard edge. "You never gave me what I wanted, Ethan. You were always so busy with your mother's approval, with preserving some legacy that meant nothing to me." Ethan's expression turned cold. "If that's true, then there's nothing left between us. You and Jake will face the consequences." Lauren's gaze hardened. She seemed about to argue but then sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Fine. I suppose it's over then." Without another word she turned and walked out, leaving Ethan standing alone in the hollow, empty mansion. After the confrontation with Lauren, Ethan returned to Grace's house, where Becky waited with a warm embrace. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of peace, knowing he'd made the right choice by pursuing justice. Becky sat with him on the porch, listening as he shared the details of his final conversation with Lauren. "I thought I knew her, Mom," he murmured, his voice tinged with regret. "I thought she cared." Becky's voice was soft, her hand gentle on his shoulder. "Sometimes we don't see people for who they truly are until it's too late. But now you know, and you're free to start fresh." They sat together in silence, the weight of their shared pain and forgiveness filling the space between them. Ethan's heart felt lighter, his mother's love giving him the strength he needed to move forward. The trial that followed became a focal point of Oak Valley's gossip. Lauren and Jake, once respected members of the community, were now pariahs, facing criminal charges for their crimes. With clear evidence, the judge ruled in favor of Thompson and Co., sentencing them to years in prison and ordering restitution for the funds they had stolen. Ethan attended every court session, his mother by his side. Each day brought both closure and grief, the weight of the betrayal lingering even as justice was served. After the final ruling, Becky hugged her son, a quiet pride in her gaze. "You did it, Ethan. You saved the company, and yourself." Ethan nodded, looking at her with newfound respect. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. You showed me what it means to stand up for what's right." With Lauren and Jake gone, Ethan focused on rebuilding Thompson and Co. The company had taken a financial hit, but its reputation remained intact, thanks to Ethan's transparency with his clients and the community. He reached out to employees, investors, and partners, promising a renewed dedication to integrity and fairness. Becky, now an integral part of the company's board, offered her wisdom and insight, guiding Ethan through the challenges of restructuring. Together, they restored the company's stability, ensuring that Thompson and Co. would continue as a beacon of honesty and reliability in the business world. One evening, as they worked late in the office, Ethan looked at his mother, his voice filled with gratitude. "Mom, I couldn't have done any of this without you. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Becky smiled, her heart full. "Ethan, you were always strong. You just needed to be reminded." Over time, the rift between Ethan and Becky healed, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. They often reflected on the journey they'd taken together, the trials they'd faced, and the lessons they'd learned. Through their shared struggle, they found a renewed appreciation for each other and the family legacy they had worked so hard to protect. One weekend, Becky invited Grace and Charlie over for a small gathering. They laughed, reminiscing about the past, celebrating the new beginnings they had found. Charlie, who had been a steady friend and confidant, had become more than an ally. He had become family. Ethan raised a toast, his gaze sweeping over the people who had stood by him through the darkest days. "To family," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "And to second chances." They clinked glasses, the warmth of their bond filling the room with hope and joy. As time passed, Becky's life began to take on a new rhythm. She continued to work with Ethan at Thompson and Co., helping to build a brighter future for the company and the community. She also became involved in local charities, dedicating her time to helping families in need and mentoring young women in business. Ethan, too, found a renewed purpose. The ordeal had given him a deeper understanding of trust and integrity, and he was determined to lead his life with those values at the forefront. The company's success became a reflection of the hard-earned lessons he had learned, and he made it a priority to ensure that no one would face the same betrayal he had experienced. One afternoon, as Becky walked through Oak Valley's town square, she paused to take in the familiar surroundings. The past year had been a journey of heartbreak, healing, and rediscovery. She had found herself in ways she hadn't anticipated, her strength and resilience emerging stronger than ever. Charlie joined her on the park bench, offering her a smile. "You did it, Becky. You turned something painful into something beautiful." Becky returned the smile, her heart full of peace. "I had the people I loved by my side, and now I feel like I've come full circle." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as children played nearby, their laughter filling the air. Becky felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had overcome every obstacle, rebuilt her family's trust, and found new purpose in life. The following spring, Thompson and Co. hosted a celebration in honor of its renewed legacy. The entire community gathered at the mansion, once again a place of warmth and joy. Becky, Ethan, Grace, and Charlie stood side by side, greeting friends and supporters who had become part of their extended family. Ethan took a moment to speak to the crowd, his voice steady and confident. "Thank you all for standing by us through our darkest moments. Today, we're not just celebrating a company. We're celebrating the strength and resilience of this community and the power of family." As the crowd applauded, Becky felt tears prick her eyes, her heart swelling with pride. She had walked through fire and emerged stronger, a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond between mother and son. As spring settled over Oak Valley, the Thompson mansion became a hub of activity. What had once been a symbol of distance and strained family ties was now transformed into a welcoming place for friends, employees, and townsfolk who had rallied around Becky and Ethan during their darkest days. With each visit, the mansion came alive again, its halls filled with laughter and light. One bright morning, Becky found herself sitting in the mansion's garden, breathing in the fresh scent of blooming roses. She had always loved the garden. It was where she'd spent countless hours over the years, finding solace among the flowers she had tended with care. Now the garden felt like a new chapter, a place not of loneliness, but of growth and hope. Grace joined her, settling into the chair beside her with a warm smile. "You've turned this place into something beautiful, Becky," she said, taking in the sight of the vibrant garden. "It's like the mansion itself has come back to life." Becky smiled, feeling a sense of peace. "It's taken a lot of time and a lot of heartache, but we've rebuilt everything from the ground up." Grace nodded, her gaze soft. "You've always had the strength, Becky. Now everyone else can see it too." With the mansion as a symbol of new beginnings, Ethan and Becky decided to establish the Thompson Family Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting small businesses in Oak Valley and surrounding communities. The foundation became their shared vision, a testament to the lessons they had learned about integrity, resilience, and community. The day of the foundation's launch was filled with excitement as townspeople, employees, and local leaders gathered at the mansion. Ethan stood beside his mother, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. "This foundation is not just about business," he began. "It's about supporting people. My mother taught me that true success is about the impact we have on the lives of others. I'm honored to carry that lesson forward, side by side with her." As the crowd applauded, Becky felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known in years. She had poured her heart into her family, and now that love had blossomed into something far-reaching, a legacy of kindness and compassion. In the weeks that followed, Becky and Ethan spent more time together than ever before. Each project they took on for the foundation brought them closer, their bond healing and strengthening with every shared experience. Ethan often sought his mother's advice, appreciating her wisdom in ways he never had before. Their relationship, once strained and fragile, was now anchored by trust and mutual respect. One evening, as they worked late in the mansion's study, Ethan looked up from a stack of documents, his gaze softening as he watched his mother. "Mom, I don't think I ever thanked you properly," he said, his voice sincere, "not just for saving the company, but for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Becky's eyes grew misty as she reached out, placing a hand on his. "You never needed to thank me, Ethan. A mother's love doesn't come with conditions. I'm just grateful that we're here, together." The simple exchange filled the room with warmth, a quiet yet profound reminder of the journey they had taken together. Inspired by her work with the foundation, Becky began to explore opportunities to give back even further. She took on a mentorship role for young women in Oak Valley, offering guidance on both business and life. Her wisdom, kindness, and resilience made her a beloved figure in the community. And soon, people began to see her as more than just Ethan's mother. She was a mentor, a friend, and a pillar of strength. Charlie, who had been Becky's rock throughout her journey, continued to support her efforts. Their friendship blossomed into something more, a gentle companionship that brought Becky a joy she hadn't expected. Charlie was there through every challenge, celebrating her successes and standing by her side during difficult moments. One evening, over dinner, he took her hand, his eyes reflecting a quiet admiration. "Becky," he said softly, "I don't know where I'd be without you. You've brought so much light into my life." Becky smiled, her heart full. "And you've shown me that life can be beautiful again, even after so much loss. Thank you, Charlie, for everything." Together they embarked on a new chapter, their relationship grounded in respect, shared values, and a love that grew with each passing day. Grace, too, found herself more involved with the foundation, helping to organize fundraisers and community events. Her natural warmth and friendliness made her the perfect liaison. connecting people and building relationships that strengthened the foundation's work. She and Becky often reflected on the journey they had taken together, the challenges they had faced, and the triumphs they had celebrated. Their friendship had withstood the test of time, growing stronger with each shared experience. "Who would have thought we'd be here?" Grace mused one evening, looking out over the Foundation's bustling offices. "We've built something amazing, Becky, something that will outlast us both." Becky nodded, a sense of pride swelling within her. "We have, and it's because we never gave up. No matter how hard it got, we stood by each other." They shared a smile, each woman knowing that their friendship was as much a part of the Foundation's legacy as any of its projects. Months later, the Foundation held a special gala in honor of Becky's contributions to Oak Valley. The event was a surprise, planned by Grace, Ethan, and Charlie, who wanted to recognize Becky's impact on the town and its people. Becky was deeply moved as she entered the beautifully decorated hall, seeing the faces of those she had helped and the gratitude in their eyes. Each person in attendance had been touched by her kindness and resilience, her dedication to making Oak Valley a better place. Ethan took the stage, his voice filled with pride. "Tonight, we celebrate a woman who has given everything to her family, her community, and her friends. My mother taught me that true strength isn't about power or wealth. It's about love, sacrifice, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Thank you, Mom, for showing us what it means to live a life of purpose." The applause that followed was thunderous, and Becky felt tears welling in her eyes as she looked around. Seeing the faces of those who had become her extended family, she knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, she had found her true calling, her life's work fulfilled. The following spring, Becky stood in the garden of the Thompson mansion, watching as the flowers bloomed in vibrant colors. The journey had been long and filled with heartache, but she had emerged stronger, more resilient, and deeply grateful for the life she had rebuilt. Ethan joined her, standing by her side as they looked out over the garden together. "Mom," he said quietly, "I know it hasn't been easy, but I'm so proud of everything you've done." "You're my hero," Becky smiled, her heart full of pride and love. "And you're mine, Ethan. You've become the man I always knew you could be." They shared a quiet moment, each lost in their thoughts, their bond stronger than ever. As they stood together, they knew that the trials they had faced had brought them closer, creating a foundation of love and respect that would endure for years to come. As the seasons changed and Oak Valley continued to thrive, Becky embraced the peace she had found. She had faced betrayal, rebuilt her family, and discovered a strength within herself she hadn't known existed. The mansion was no longer a place of isolation, but a warm, welcoming home filled with love, laughter, and the promise of tomorrow. In her quiet moments, Becky often thought about the journey that had led her here. She felt a deep gratitude for the people who had stood by her side: Grace, Charlie, Ethan, and the community that had embraced her. Together, they had created something beautiful, a legacy of love and resilience that would continue to grow, touching lives in ways she could only imagine. With the past behind her and the future bright before her, Becky Thompson stepped into a new chapter, her heart open, her spirit renewed, and her life filled with the joy of second chances and the strength of family. As Becky and Ethan show us, sometimes life's greatest challenges can lead to the most beautiful new beginnings. If you enjoyed this story of resilience, forgiveness, and family, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt journeys like this one. Hit the bell icon to be notified whenever a new story is posted, so you never miss a tale that might inspire and uplift you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.